He wasn't asking for toys. He was praying for the lights to come back on, for his mother to smile again, and maybe, just maybe, for a pair of socks without holes. On a freezing Christmas Eve, one boy sat alone on a broken porch, whispering a quiet wish into the cold night. And just when the world seemed to pass him by, a stranger took a wrong turn, and everything changed. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and like the video, and tell us where you're watching from. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and let us know what you think. Now, let's jump into the story. On the edge of town, where the streetlights flickered and snow fell in quiet sheets, a narrow road curved away from the main route. It was called Pine Street, though most of the trees that gave it that name had long since disappeared. The houses there stood old and tired, with paint peeling from the walls and porches that sagged from age. It was Christmas Eve. The air was sharp, filled with the stillness that only winter brings. Along the well-lit parts of the city, laughter echoed and windows glowed with warm light. Children opened gifts early, families gathered around fireplaces, and Christmas music filled every corner of cheerful homes. But not on Pine Street. On one crooked porch, there sat a small boy, knees pulled tight to his chest, hands pressed together in front of him. His name was Leon. He was 8 years old, wearing a coat too thin for the weather, and shoes that had long lost their shape. Holes in his socks let the cold bite through. But he didn't complain. Instead, he whispered words only the wind could hear. He wasn't praying for toys. That's what would stop Marla in her tracks just moments later. She hadn't planned to be on Pine Street at all. Marla was a florist, finishing her last delivery of the night before heading home to her own warm kitchen. She had taken a wrong turn, something her GPS couldn't correct fast enough, and ended up driving slowly through this forgotten part of town. As she neared the stop sign at the end of the street, her eyes caught a figure on one of the porches. A child, alone, unmoving. Marla's foot eased off the gas. She stared, heart beginning to pound. Something inside her said, "Don't just drive by." The boy didn't notice her. He was too focused on his quiet prayer. Marla rolled down her window slightly. The cold air rushed in, along with his voice. "Let her be okay. Please let the lights come back on. I don't need presents. Just a smile from Mama. Just a warm night." Her breath caught. She turned off the car, opened the door, and stepped into the cold. Snow crunched under her boots as she walked toward the house. Every part of her wanted to believe that this was a misunderstanding, that someone was nearby. But the house was dark, the windows were cracked, the mailbox hung open, filled with old envelopes. No movement inside, no holiday lights, just the boy and the silence around him. She spoke softly. "Hey there, are you all right?" Leon jumped, startled. His eyes, wide and unsure, met hers. There was no panic, but a kind of deep, worn fear. The kind you see in someone who's used to being ignored, who's learned not to expect anyone to stay. "My name's Leon," he said quietly. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers, but I was just praying." Marla knelt beside him, careful not to scare him. "What are you praying for?" He pointed to a piece of paper beside him. It was a list, written in pencil, smudged and slightly torn. The handwriting was messy, the words misspelled. "Not for toys," he whispered. "Just for Mama to stop crying, for the lights to come back on, and maybe socks. Mine got holes." Marla felt her throat tighten. She looked at the paper, then at the boy's feet. The socks were thin, stretched, and worn through at the toes. One was tied in a knot to keep it from slipping off. Inside her, something shifted. Marla had spent the whole day delivering flowers to warm houses filled with laughter. She had gifts waiting under her own tree, a roast in the oven. But now, none of that seemed to matter. She glanced around. Across the street, a curtain moved. Someone was watching. A woman walking her dog paused mid-step. A man on his porch stood still. People saw, but no one moved. Pine Street had become a place where hope faded without notice. But tonight, that was going to change. Marla stood up, her heart steady now. She didn't have a plan yet, but she knew one thing. She wasn't leaving Leon alone on that porch. As snow began to fall again, soft and steady, she turned back to her car. There were calls to make, people she could reach. But most of all, there was a boy who had asked for nothing more than a little warmth and a reason for his mother to smile again. And Marla had decided she was going to answer his prayer. Marla didn't go home. As she drove away from the porch on Pine Street, her thoughts kept circling back to Leon. His quiet voice, the cold air around him, the list with misspelled hopes written in pencil. It clung to her heart like frost on glass. Instead of heading toward her warm kitchen, she parked at the nearest grocery store and pulled out her phone. There was someone she could call, Silas. They had known each other since school, and now he worked at a local help center. If anyone knew how to handle a situation like this, it was him. "Hey," she said as he picked up, her voice low. "I need your help. There's a boy. He's alone on a porch. It's Christmas Eve. He's freezing. His house, it looks abandoned. And he's not praying for toys, Silas. He's praying for heat and for his mom to stop crying." Silas didn't hesitate. "Send me the address. I'll alert the outreach team. We'll get someone out there tonight." Marla exhaled slowly. Then she walked through the store, grabbing things without overthinking. A warm blanket, 2 thick pairs of socks, hot cocoa packets, a set of battery-powered lights, a small sandwich, and a bottle of juice. It wasn't much, but it was something. Meanwhile, back on Pine Street, Leon remained on the porch, knees still tucked to his chest. He had watched Marla leave, unsure if she would return. Part of him had already learned to expect people to disappear. That's what they did. They stopped, they looked, they walked away. His mother, Brenna, was still inside. She had not moved in hours. The room was dark and cold. There was no food on the table, no music, only silence. She had cried herself into sleep again, lost in the weight of unpaid bills, a broken heater, and the guilt of not being enough. Outside, lights glowed in other homes. Families laughed, unaware of the quiet ache that lived just a few houses away. Marla came back less than an hour later. She parked her car, stepped out with a shopping bag, and saw that Leon was still there, still waiting. "I told you I'd come back," she said softly. His eyes lit up, just a little. Still unsure, still cautious, but a flicker of belief started to grow. She knelt down and handed him the blanket first, then the socks, then the hot cocoa in a warm thermos. "These are for you, and your mom. I don't know what you like, but I figured everyone likes cocoa on a cold night." Leon wrapped the blanket around himself. It was soft, thick, warmer than anything he'd felt in weeks. "Thank you," he whispered. She took out the small string of lights next. Powered by batteries, they glowed a gentle yellow, like stars you could touch. Marla carefully wrapped them around the porch railing, lighting up the space with soft light. From across the street, eyes peeked through windows. The dog walker paused again. A man drinking coffee on his own porch put down his mug. Whispers began to spread. "Is that the same boy? He's still out there? Someone should really do something." But no one moved. Not yet. Marla turned and looked at the watchers. Her gaze met theirs, not with anger, but with quiet challenge. For the first time, Those watching looked away, ashamed. Inside the house, something stirred. Brenna, woken by the faint glow and the sound of movement outside, pulled on her thin robe and stepped toward the door. She opened it slowly, face pale and eyes swollen from tears. When she saw Marla kneeling beside her son, her voice caught in her throat. I have more apologies. I'm sorry, Bren. He wasn't supposed to be outside this long. I didn't know what else to do anymore. I didn't know who to call. I didn't think anyone would care. Marla stood and stepped closer. You don't have to be sorry, she said gently. You're not alone anymore. Brenna's shoulders sagged, the weight of weeks slipping off her for just a moment. A porch that had once been forgotten was now glowing. And then, slowly, something changed. The woman walking her dog crossed the street and handed Leon a wrapped cookie. A young man appeared with an old coat and asked if anyone needed help fixing the front steps. A teenager offered a small teddy bear. Another neighbor said he had a heater in storage he wasn't using. People who had looked away for weeks now stepped forward. Leon watched in silence, his eyes wide. For the first time in a long while, his prayer didn't feel like a whisper in the wind. Marla looked at the porch, now full of soft light and new faces, and felt something shift inside her too. The town was remembering itself. Kindness was waking up. It was just the beginning, but it was enough to show that hope had found its way back to Pine Street. The next morning, Pine Street looked almost the same. Snow covered the sidewalks, windows stayed shut, and chimneys puffed gentle smoke into the gray sky. But one house had changed. Not completely, not yet, but enough to notice. Leon's porch, once dark and forgotten, now shimmered with soft yellow light. The string of battery-powered lights Marla had wrapped around the railing continued to glow. Beside them, a folded blanket rested, now warmed from the night before. A thermos, empty but still clean, sat neatly next to a pair of fresh socks. Inside the house, something else was shifting. Brenna stood by the window, holding a cup of hot tea someone had dropped off that morning. Her hands still trembled. Her heart still carried the weight of worry, but for the first time in weeks, she felt the faint beat of something she thought was gone. Hope. Leon sat on the floor, drawing with a crayon on the back of the same piece of paper he had used for his prayer. It was no longer just a list. Now it was becoming a picture. A porch with lights, a blanket, a woman with kind eyes, people standing together. Outside, more footsteps began to echo down the street. Marla returned around noon, carrying a small box of supplies. This time, she wasn't alone. Silas came with her, wearing a warm jacket and carrying a clipboard. Behind him was a woman from the help center, and next to her, a man holding a toolbox. They weren't there to talk. They were there to help. As Marla knocked on the door, Brenna opened it slowly. Her eyes were tired, but there was no fear in them now. "We're back," Marla said gently. "And we brought some friends." Brenna nodded, stepping aside. It was the first time she had invited anyone in. Silas walked through the small living room, taking quiet notes. The heat wasn't working, the fridge was nearly empty, and the roof had a slow leak in the back corner. But the home was still standing, and that was enough to start. Outside, neighbors passed by again. Only this time, they didn't just stare. A woman named Jody from 3 houses down carried over a bag of groceries. A teenager from the next block arrived with a broom and shovel. An older man with thick glasses brought a bag of nails and a small box of tools. Someone brought cookies. Someone else brought a heater. One woman simply brought a warm smile and a gentle hug. The porch, once cold and silent, became a small hub of movement. Voices rose in soft conversation, tools tapped, laughter echoed in pieces, and slowly, the entire block began to feel alive again. Leon watched from the doorway. He didn't speak much, but his eyes followed every person who came. His gaze landed on Marla the most. Whenever he looked uncertain, she gave him a small nod. It told him she wasn't going anywhere. Brenna stood beside her son, one hand resting gently on his shoulder. Her robe was replaced with a clean sweater someone had brought. Her face still held shadows of exhaustion, but now they were mixed with light. By evening, the porch had been swept, the steps reinforced, and a small heater hummed softly inside the home. A volunteer from the shelter had brought a warm meal. Mashed potatoes, chicken, and soft bread filled the kitchen with a scent Leon hadn't smelled in weeks. Inside the house, Brenna sat at the table for the first time in a long while. Silas helped her fill out some simple forms: emergency support, housing repair programs, job connections. The kind of help that only shows up when someone cares enough to knock. Leon ate slowly, as if trying to make each bite last. He smiled once. A shy little thing. Marla saw it and smiled back. That night, the porch glowed brighter. Not because of decorations or gifts, but because people had remembered what it meant to show up, to care, to give, not for praise, but because it was right. Down the street, houses that had once been silent now flickered with curiosity. Someone was changing things. Someone was leading by example. And it all started because a boy whispered a prayer on a porch, and one woman decided to stop. Before leaving that night, Marla knelt beside Leon once again. "You did this," she said softly. "Your words reminded us how to listen." Leon looked at her, confused. "But I didn't do anything." She shook her head gently. "You hoped. That's more than enough." As the night settled in and the snow returned in soft flurries, Pine Street wasn't just a forgotten road anymore. It was becoming something new, something better, and the porch, once hidden in the shadows, now stood as a symbol. A reminder that one quiet voice, heard by the right person, can change everything. Days passed quietly on Pine Street, but something was different now. Where silence once lived, voices began to rise. Not loud, not rushed, but steady, warm, hopeful. The porch that had once sat alone in the cold had become the heart of something unexpected. People came and went. Some brought tools, others food. A few just came to talk. It was no longer about charity. It had become something deeper, community. Leon stood at the window one morning, his small hands resting on the sill. He watched as Mr. Darrell, the neighbor who never used to wave, hammered a new board into the steps. Across the yard, Miss Jody handed his mother a box of pantry items with a gentle smile. Another neighbor leaned down to pet a stray cat that had made the porch its new home. Inside, the air was warmer now, not just because of the new heater, but because something had come alive again in the home. Brenna moved with purpose. Her steps no longer dragged. She had a list on the fridge now. Small goals. Cook dinner. Make it to the job interview. Read with Leon before bed. The job interview came sooner than expected. The owner of a bakery downtown, after hearing about her story from the local news, reached out. He needed help in the mornings, and he liked giving second chances. Brenna went in nervous, but returned with a quiet smile and the promise of a paycheck. Marla continued to visit, though not every day now. She knew the healing had begun. Her role had shifted from rescuer to friend. Sometimes, She just sat on the porch with Leon and listened as he talked about his drawings, his hopes, and how he wanted to give socks to other kids one day. One afternoon, a reporter from the local station came by. They had heard about what was happening on Pine Street, how a boy's prayer had brought strangers together, how a forgotten porch had become a symbol of kindness. The story spread quickly. Soon, donations began to arrive from nearby towns. A contractor offered to fix the roof. A church group volunteered to paint the house. Someone sent gift cards. Another sent toys. But the most valuable gift was not something that came in a box. It was the reminder that even now, good things can grow from hard places. On Christmas morning, the house was quiet, but not empty. Leon woke to the smell of pancakes and the sound of his mother humming in the kitchen. The table was set. Sunlight filtered through the windows. The lights on the porch still glowed gently in the early morning gray. Beside his bed was a small box, neatly wrapped in brown paper. He opened it slowly. Inside, he found a new pair of socks, soft, thick, and warm. Next to them, a folded note. "Thank you for reminding us how to care. Keep shining. Love, Marla." Leon smiled. It wasn't wide or loud, but it was full. The kind of smile that reaches the heart. Brenna stood in the doorway, holding a mug of tea. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her eyes said it all. They had made it through the storm. And even if life wasn't perfect, it was moving forward. Outside, the porch looked different now. No longer sagging, no longer bare. It was painted a soft blue. The steps were solid. A small chair sat in the corner, with a blanket folded neatly on top. It looked like a place someone cared about. And as the town slowly returned to its routines after the holidays, and Brenna, once certain that no one would care, now stood as proof that even the smallest bit of help can lead to something bigger. Marla, back at her flower shop, often looked out the window and smiled. She knew she hadn't fixed everything, but she had started something. A ripple, a reminder. Sometimes it doesn't take a hero or a miracle to change a life. Sometimes all it takes is someone who decides to care. Someone who chooses to stop, to listen, and to act. As snow began to fall again, soft and light, Leon stepped out onto the porch in his new socks. He looked up at the sky, then out at the street. And in that quiet moment, the world didn't feel so big anymore. It felt close. It felt kind. Because sometimes the ones who answer our prayers aren't distant or magical. They're just strangers who choose to remember what it means to be human.